broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of Gun Guy Radio is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Hello and welcome to episode 184 of Gun Guy Radio. This is the podcast that shines a positive light on the firearms lifestyle. I'm your host, Ryan Machad, and this is your weekly dose of positive firearms talk without the politics. This week, I'm joined by Ebbs from House of Guns and House of Arms to discuss the Thompson center line of rifles and single-shot pistols. So as always, please consider supporting the Firearms Radio Network by shopping Amazon using our Amazon affiliate link at firearmsradio.tv/Amazon. A portion of your purchase will go towards helping the FRN create awesome pro-gun content like this show. Also, check out the Huckleberry Patch from the Patriot Patch Company. And also, the Bullpup Shoot in Mount Carroll, Illinois is coming up at the end of September, so be sure to check out the link there in the show notes. So, Ebbs, great to have you on the show. How you doing?
Good, man. Glad to be here.
So, we're going to head right into the main topic, Thompson Center with Ebbs of House of Guns and House of Arms.
Do you shop on Amazon? How about your spouse? Does your mom? Does your, company? Why not use the Firearms Radio Network's Amazon affiliate link next time you shop Amazon? Bookmark firearmsradio.tv/Amazon or click through the Amazon link in the right-hand corner of firearmsradio.tv. Get it? Got it? Amazon it!
Now, Ebbs, honestly, this is going to be kind of an education for me, too, because I've only had one experience with a Thompson Center firearm, and it was a pistol, and I want to say it was in 30-30. It was quite a long time ago, but I remember it not being as fearsome as I thought it was going to be when I first heard a 30-30 pistol. Yeah,
it's funny, whenever somebody says that, I haven't had any experience, or I only have one experience, I always worry because sometimes it seems like people like that can really have hit and miss, whether it's good or bad. So I was worried that you were going to say it was a terrible experience and you never touched them again and something like that. But yeah, people are really surprised at how mild it can be shooting a rifle caliber round through a 14-inch barrel, 15-inch, or even a 10-inch barrel.
It really is incredible. I mean, I'm kind of a recoil whore, and I like loading .357 Magnums to as high as I can without blowing the gun up. So
nice.
I mean, it doesn't really bother me that much. But I was still kind of like, man, 30-30 in a handgun. That's going to be a hell of a kick, and it wasn't that bad, honestly. And I've heard it has something to do with the way the grip's designed. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but
I think it's more, and it's good. It's almost on the pistol versions, it's almost kind of a 90-degree grip, or not much more open than that. But I think really, truthfully, it's more of not being afraid to let the muzzle flip. You kind of let the gun do what it does. And then two is that rifle powder in that shorter barrel. If you're shooting that slower burning rifle powder through that barrel, it a lot of times doesn't necessarily have a chance to get all the way. You won't get a complete burn out of it, so you get a lot of muzzle blast or flash and stuff like that, but you're not having the full force and pressure that you would get if you're shooting a 30-30, say, through a 24-inch barrel.
Right. So before we get any further into the actual Thompson Center firearms, how did you yourself get started shooting firearms?
Just guns in general?
Yeah.
My dad rescued me at a young age, and I didn't know it till I was older, but when I was 4 years old, we moved from the city, and when I say city, I mean St. Louis City, out into rural Missouri, to a town that didn't even have any stoplights in it when we moved there. And we had a little bit of acreage, and he had decided he wanted to start hunting. I think he was probably about 27 years old at the time, had very limited experience shooting. And I can remember vividly the first deer season when we lived in that house. I was 5 years old at that point, and I remember seeing his deer. I woke up, and he already had a deer hanging in the tree behind the house, and I knew his rifle. I'd looked at it. He had a 1896 Swedish Mauser, 6.5 Swede, and it was a gorgeous gun that I'm sad to say he doesn't still have. He traded away in 1997. So, but he killed his first deer with that. It was kind of a little scrub buck, 5-point, not anything too impressive. But that was back in Missouri when you actually had to draw for tags in the mid 80s. And so I remember seeing that, and I became at that point in my mind a passionate hunter. And that involved guns, and it involved archery and just about everything you can imagine to slay an animal with. Slingshot, whatever. I was a marksman at heart. And I got my first pellet gun. I think he decided I was old enough for my own when I was about 9, and which is late. My daughter got her first gun when she was 4, firearm when she was 4. But we were new to it. We were city people, and he made a really good friend at church who helped introduce us to everything, teach us everything. And when I was 9, I got a Sheridan. Now they're Benjamin Sheridan, Silver Streak pump action 20 caliber pellet gun, and I killed more bullfrogs with that. I mean, you could fill a house with them. I killed so many bullfrogs. We have frog legs all the time, and started with that, open sights, learned the front blade and the rear notch, and had at it, killed squirrels with that. And then when I was 11, Christmas 1991, he bought me a 20 gauge New England Firearms Pardner single shot shotgun, and we called that the wooden hammer because it weighed about 5 pounds, and I hunted squirrels with full brass number 4 Magnum shells. And when I was 11 years old, I weighed every bit of, 70 pounds. I was tiny and just a rail, and learned to not be afraid of recoil and stuff like that. And then killed my first few deer with a bow. But I slug hunted with that, just that front bead, killed some deer with that. And then it got out of control after that. When I was 16, I got a 300 Win Mag, and I don't know how many dozens of deer I hung on the wall with it. And my first elk too in 2006. And the rest is history, as it were. And because I was interested in it, Dad got into it by default, and that's kind of how we found ourselves in this whole Thompson Center world of retail.
It's kind of funny, yeah. My dad was a cop in our town, and my first gun that I ever shot was a Smith & Wesson Model 66 and 357 Magnum, and I loved it. First time I touched it off, I said, I love that gun.
That's awesome. How old were you?
I think I was probably 13 the first time I ever shot.
That's beautiful.
With a full house 125 grain.
Right.
I think it was a Federal hollow point. And then as it progressed, I got more into it, and then he really wasn't into it, and he retired, and I said, well, we bought you a present, and we had bought him a Ruger LCP because he had to give back his Glock, and I had all his other guns. So we bought him an LCP, and he's slowly gotten into it, and he's been a little bit more interested. It's kind of cool to see how sometimes your hobby can transfer over.
Well, and that's a good gun to get somebody. It's a great little concealable, reliable pocket pistol. Terrible trigger,
yeah.
But everybody's in love with triggers now, and that used to not be a big deal. But that's a great gun to get somebody if you're not sure they're going to love it or love guns in general, because then you're only out like $300.
Right, and he was a revolver guy, so he was kind of used to that trigger anyway.
Sure, yeah, terrible trigger. The sight radius is a whole different thing, but if you're aiming at a pie plate at 10 feet, it's no big deal.
So what's the separation between House of Guns and House of Arms, and how did each get started?
Well, House of Guns was started in, February of 2011, and I had kind of had the idea tossing around with a buddy for a while. I'd done a couple reviews on a personal YouTube account, and he said, man, you've got to have the mentality of a host. I speak for a living anyway, so I'm comfortable whether it's talking to a camera in front of people or whatever. And I come from a family of men that can talk to a rock for days if they need to. And I just kind of jumped in and had 20 years of experience, 22 years of experience with guns, a lot of hand loading, a lot of hunting, a lot of defensive shooting, kind of a mixed bag of things. And So House of Guns was born. I had bought the name back in 2009, the web name. And by the way, if you're listening, House of Guns is Haus. It's a play on my last name, Ebbinghaus, Ebbinghaus. So House of Guns was born, and I learned that if you do quality work, then companies will contact you and say, hey, can you give us an honest review on our product? And now I'm learning that if you do well enough and if you grow your brand and you become respected, that occasionally you can keep the products, which is kind of cool, guns included. So I just approached it humbly. I don't think I'm anybody. I just like to talk about guns. So I started that. And this question actually bleeds into the TC question, how we got into that. But, Dad, like I said, by default, me being a fanatic, he kind of followed along and he was the, kind of held the door for me for a long time when I was living at home growing up, and allowed me to shoot and have opportunities to do that, and knew that he could spend a lot of time with me doing it. So we had started hobby collecting Thompson Center firearms probably in 2008, and learning that a lot of people would sell collections. Now, with the TC gun, you can have a frame and a stock set for a rifle, for instance, and you can put any number of barrel calibers or configurations on that gun. So you have one gun, one serial number, and then as many barrels as you want. You get under 16 inches with the barrels. You can have a pistol frame, and we'll get into the legal logistics of that in a little bit too, I know, but you could get a pistol frame and have rifle calibers available with pistol. If you have somebody who's handicapped or hunting from a wheelchair, or they just don't want to carry something heavier, they want the challenge of something with limited range and only one shot, you have the pistol option too. So we started buying up collections, and then found that we could keep what we wanted for our growing TC collection and then sell the remainder on Gunbroker. And we started making money doing it. And then we got to the point where the hobby was kind of funding the hobby. The hobby of selling these things started funding the hobby because we had our gun budgets in quotations, husbands and fathers and sons, the gun budget thing, you have to convince your wife of how much you can spend on guns, but they really like it when what you're spending on guns is coming from guns, and she's like, well, how much did that cost us? And you get to say, well, it didn't cost us anything, Then you got to be careful because they're like, well, how much money are you making exactly? And so that led to Dad getting his FFL, and only really so it was easier to receive these collections that we would buy. And then we started buying up all the local stuff, and it was harder to find the stuff on Gunbroker and online and such. And he started becoming a distributor, a retailer for these stocking distributors that are all over the country, and that grew. And then we launched his website in August of 2012. So it's been just over 3 years. This is an online gun store. Everything's on the up and up. We are a full FFL, so we receive in firearms. We send out firearms. We can do transfers. We're in Colorado, so any gun that you buy is requires a transfer. But we're not a storefront, so it's kind of a 21st century gun shop online that specializes in Thompson Center arms, and we've been picking up some CVA stuff, components for these single shot rifles, and it's borderline out of control. Dad can barely run it full time by himself. I work several hours a week helping him do orders and helping him do orders and doing trigger jobs. We do these enhanced trigger jobs with polished components, and we can take a stock 6-pound trigger down to 2 pounds or 2.5 pounds like clockwork, and it's no slack, breaks like glass. Anyway, all that to say, I get excited about it, thinking of the story and thinking of where we've been. But House of Arms, the name, came just as a spinoff of House of Guns. I was doing the reviews and spending time doing that, and that afforded me some pretty cool opportunities. And so we said, well, with same last name, let's just call this one House of Arms.
Well, in Thompson Center, is kind of a niche in the market. There really isn't anybody who specializes in the custom Thompson Center game aside from you guys that I've heard of.
Yeah, TC's been around a long time. You see a lot of their stuff on the Outdoor Channel and Sportsman's Channel. But as far as the industry goes, it's evolved so much towards the AR-15 and towards the tactical market, by the way, all of which I love also, that this kind of thing sort of gets buried. And we joke around when we do shows like this or at SHOT Show and, explaining what Dad does. Dad just kind of leads in and says, these are old man guns. And but they're really specific. There's a lot that you can customize and can control about something that doesn't have very many moving parts. The engineering of it is very simple, and it is super niche in that online, especially, there are only a couple of competitors. Ebco is one, E. Arthur Brown Company, and they actually market their own barrels. I'm not sure if they turn them in-house, but they've got their name on barrels for Thompson Center. And then Mike Bellum, TCs, he's a big-time custom guy, David White in Tulsa, and some of these people that we're meeting that do some trigger work, will do barrel work, but in terms of sizable retail store, we've become one of the biggest. It felt like overnight. I mean, there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but when you turn around and you think, well, he's only had this website live for 3 years, and last year our gross income, I don't even want to go there, but it was a lot, way above six figures, and that's not necessarily the take home too, but things just blew up, and you realize, hey, it is a niche market, but we found it, and there's a market for these. We started stocking laminate aftermarket stock sets for rifles, both Contender and Encore, and they're made by Boyd's, and we are the only retailer that they sell to. You can either buy them from Boyd's or buy them from us, and we are the same price as them, and our customer service is times 10 better than theirs. You go to the website, houseofarms.com, Haus. You look at the phone number on there. That is my dad's cell phone number. You will get him every time, or his voicemail, and he will turn around and call you right back if he doesn't get you. So we pride ourselves in that customer service and kind of ministering to that group of people that still really love this type of firearm.
Well, and that's the funny thing. I mean, you know, a lot of people kind of write it off. They say, "Oh, you're like your dad said, an old man's gun." But what other platform are you going to get that sort of stuff on? I mean, for instance, everybody rags on me for being a revolver guy, and I went and bought a Steyr C9, and I love it. But everybody's like, "Why didn't you buy a Glock?" And I'm like, "Well, I just like that kind of gun." And for some people, that's all you need. I know a lot of people who hunt big game up here who use the Thompson Center platform. I believe in the rifle cartridges. Sure. And they're like, "Why do you just want to cripple yourself with one shot?" And they're like, "Well, that's just the gun I'm comfortable with." Sure.
Yeah, and the mentality isn't to cripple yourself with one shot. The mentality is to challenge yourself. When I first got into TC, and I think this is actually one of your upcoming questions, so I apologize to jump ahead.
Oh, that's perfect.
When I first got into TC, I was this is question number 3 that you have on the list. Awesome. I was archery hunting about 30 days a year and had been successful at it, and was kind of turned off to the guys in the area that I grew up in East Central Missouri that were taking as many rounds as they could with them and flinging bullets at deer at 400 yards. Now, there are guys that can kill deer out west here in Colorado now. 400 yards is kind of a chip shot on occasion. But back there in the hardwoods, 400 yard shot on a deer, if you're shooting it that far, it's already running, And they were just I felt like they were taking the sport out of it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to transfer this challenge of archery hunting to a little bit more limited range. I'm going to go to a single shot, but I'm not even going to do it in center fire. I'm going to get a muzzle loader. And so I bought in 2007. Thompson Center had just released a year or two before their Pro Hunter version of the Encore. And it had, a modernized synthetic stock, and it had limb saver all the way through it, cut down on recoil. And the first time out with that barrel, it was a 28-inch inline muzzleloader barrel, 50 cal, kind of following their directions. They even have a DVD that comes with it. Now, I'd fired traditional muzzleloaders growing up. Dad and I both killed deer with them. And when I say traditional, I mean cap and ball. Not quite flintlock traditional or Pennsylvania rifle, but like a Hawken carbine, St. Louis Hawken rifle type barreled gun, lead ball, patch, all of that rustic old stuff. I said, so I'm going to go muzzleloader, but I'm going to stretch it out, and I want one that can be a little bit more accurate range. So I found this Pro Hunter. A local guy didn't carry it in stock. He ordered it for me with tax. I paid $864 for this Encore. Now, I knew I could get other frames and other stuff like that, but $864 for a muzzleloader, and I got ridiculed so hardcore by, first and foremost, my father. The guy who lives and breathes Thompson Center guns 24/7 gave me the hardest time for saving up. It took me about 13 months, I think, set money away. Didn't have disposable gun budget back then. And, my wife, her mentality was every time I'd want to buy a new gun, she'd say, okay, now is this probably the last one? And I would just say, well, what do you mean? And I spent $864 on that muzzleloader, went to Michigan with it, with a buddy, hunted on his parents' farm. On the third day, things have been slow. On the third day, I stuck it out through the middle of the day. I didn't do the typical hunter thing of going out first thing in the morning, then going in and having lunch. I said, you know what, I'm going to play it out midday and see if there's any bucks trolling for does that are bedded down. Sure enough, 115, this monster 9-point buck rolls across this soybean field, and I couldn't get him to stop. I had a Nikon Omega muzzleloader scope on it, so I dialed it up, ranged it, 109 yards. I hollered at him to get him to stop because he was on a mission, cruising for does. Put it high on his shoulder, shot, and I dropped him. He fell like a ton of bricks. 109 yards for a muzzleloader for us then was unheard of. We were 50 yards, maybe 90 yards. I think my dad killed one at 90 yards, and we thought he was Carlos Hathcock sniper style. We didn't do it. And the fact that buck was on the move, so I killed this buck, sent a picture home to Dad. I said, hey, what do you think of my $864 muzzleloader now? Now, I took that to Michigan in place of hunting with a shotgun with slugs. We were near Kalamazoo. That part of Michigan didn't allow centerfire rifles for that season. And even the guy that I hunted with was hunting with a Remington 1100 slug gun. He's like, don't you want more than one shot? I said, no, let's just see if this works. Made the shot, smoked that buck right on the spot. I was so pumped. Sent a picture to Dad, and he's like, well, maybe you're turning me into a believer. The next week, came home to Missouri for opening week, had an 8-point come across a field, went into the woods at 80 yards, shot through heavy brush and tree limbs, and lunged him. He ran downhill to a creek bottom, fell, bled out. And after that deer, Dad said, I got to get one. I have to get one of these now. So he got one in 25-06. He said, well, I don't know if I want to do the muzzleloader right away, etc. And that was kind of what started that whole landslide of obsession because I paid, in his opinion, way too much for a stainless steel muzzleloader, inline muzzleloader that I just had seen on TV, and Jim Shockey had planted an idea in my mind or something like that. So anyway, that was how we found our way into it early on.
Now, everybody knows Thompson Center as the guys who make that single shot break action design, but they actually do have a more diverse product line. Now, what other firearms do they offer?
Well, they're so well known for the interchangeable barrel system, and that started with the Contenders way back in the 60s, the Contender pistols, and then also rifles. It's a smaller frame, single shot break action. And so with that multi-barrel platform, they released back in 2012 the Dimension lineup. And the Dimension is an interchangeable barrel bolt action system. And kind of a funny space age looking stock and a really solid and durable matte blue finish. And I've actually had more success hunting with the Dimension than I have the Encore, just because I've used it more since we've lived out west here, muleys in Nebraska and antelope in Wyoming and in 30-06, and then with coyotes and prairie dogs in 204 Ruger caliber. And with that gun, first time I ever had it out, I printed a 3/4 inch group, 5-shot group with the 204 Ruger, shooting 40 grain, a Hornady VMAX, and Dad had his 7/08 barrel rechambered to a 280 Ackley improved, and the first time out with that barrel to break it in, had a muzzle brake put on it too. First time out with that barrel, I shot an 11/16 inch 5-shot group at 100 yards with that gun. So the Dimension is good. I think based on what we're seeing with stock supply at distributors around, it looks like they might be phasing that one out, which is kind of a bummer. I don't think they put enough into it, but when you're labeled so much as a single shot company and then you venture into the bolt action line, things can be challenging. And I don't know that they gave enough time or put enough money behind it, but in that process too, Thompson Center was bought out by Smith & Wesson. And so the people at Smith & Wesson have kind of decided what stays and what goes. But they also have the Venture line of bolt-action guns, and they would kind of be a really budgetary type Remington 700, Savage 110 style rifle, really affordable bolt-action with great accuracy, results in that $400 range. And they're button rifled. They're 5R button rifled. All the barrels are, and which has proven to be one of the most affordable manufacturing styles, but also one of the most accurate. So great accuracy through those barrels, and long barrel life. We're seeing, and they have those in tons of different camo finishes and black, matte, and all different kinds of stuff. So the Venture and the Dimension are the two main ones. And I did mention the Contender. The Contender is a smaller framed kind of Encore. If you would look at it now, or you're new to Thompson Center, the Encore, the Pro Hunter, the Endeavor style rifles and pistols are familiar to you. The Contender came out in 1967, I want to say. Dad knows this way better than I do at this point, and he makes fun of me because I'm the one that's supposed to know it. But Contenders came out in the 60s. And the Encores allowed them to start shooting heavier calibers, But one thing, too, and we can get to the Contenders here in just a second to talk about the differences, but I guess about their product line, they have a coating that they put on their Encore and Encore frames and barrels and muzzleloaders that's available. It's called Weather Shield. And I think it's kind of, they don't call it Cerakote, but I think it's kind of a factory Cerakote type knockoff. It's ceramic based, I believe. Nobody over there will talk about it if you ask. They refuse to give details. The whole exterior of the barrel and the frame, and they are ridiculously durable to moisture, durable to scratch and dent, and it's a fantastic coating that they put on these. And I think we might start seeing some of these Venture rifles in a Weather Shield type coating too, because as far as factory finishes go, it's one of the more affordable ones. It's cheaper than blue and stainless because the process is less expensive, and it's standard steel, 410 stainless, 411 stainless, maybe something like that. But yeah, just rounding off, I didn't want to leave that out about their products. The finish that you can get on their Encore guns, the Weather Shield is really solid.
Now, talking between the two ones that people probably know the best, the Encore and the Contender, what's the difference between the Encore and the Contender? Because I believe the Encore was introduced in 1983.
Yes, and it's interesting because while the Contender put them on the map for single shot break barrel platforms, the internals are very different. Especially the Contender actually has 3 generations of the Gen 1s, which came out originally in the 60s, and which they kept modifying designs due to accidental discharge related to, like, for instance, if the hammer was down and maybe you dropped the firearm, that it would strike the firing pin and ignite the primer, and you'd have the gun go off, even though it wasn't cocked or something like that. The Contenders are cool because they actually have a rimfire, centerfire selector on the hammer. But on the Encore system, the rimfire barrels are what is different. The barrel itself is actually offset. So, for instance, if you're shooting a .22 long rifle, you'll strike the rim of that cartridge with the center primer, and it's offset from the bore is technically off the center of the frame, which is a little bit funky, but with sighting things in with an optic or open sight isn't that big of a deal. So you have that with the rimfire, centerfire. And then in the early 2000s, Thompson Center started making G2 Contender frames. And the G2, if there's 3 generations to the Gen 1, the G2 is still in its first generation. And it is the most similar to the Encore as far as internals go. All of the parts, the sear, the hammer, the sear spring trigger, you could lay them side by side and they look very, very, very similar. The original ones, it was a whole different animal. So basically, when the Encore came along, they simplified the Contender platform, made it bigger, and allowing you to shoot Magnum level cartridges. But they don't recommend cartridges with pressures, I want to say, over like 45,000 psi, just based on what they can hold. It's a small system, it's lightweight, it's simple, and it's fairly rugged, but you can get crazy with some Wildcat stuff, and I've seen frames bend as a result of that before.
Yeah, wasn't there a guy that had a, I don't remember whether it was a Contender or Encore, but one in 600 nitro?
Yeah, nuts. And now, if it's you can get away with the bigger ones in the pistols than you can in the rifles. Remember, like we said earlier, because of the pressures. The longer the barrel you have on a slow burning powder, the more pressure that builds up and results in more recoil. On the pistol, you can get into some of the bigger ones, the 375 JDJ, and I've got a buddy that's got an Encore even in a 416 rig. And that's held up okay. But his son-in-law had one chambered. Now these are all people that we've converted. These are dad. My father's proselytized all of his friends, and they've got Encores, and he'll give them a dealer price on or something to get them started, and then they'll get hooked and start buying barrels. But he's got his friend's son-in-law had a 7mm STW. And that's for Shooting Times Westerner, and it looks like a small artillery shell. And he actually he ruined his factory frame with it because the pressure was too high. At which point TC gives you a hard time because they won't warrant anything, and they know that their frames will hold up to the abuse of standard semi-spec factory rounds. But yeah, that's a whole other story.
Now, before we get into what you guys do with the guns, what are some of the legalities surrounding the Thompson Center Encore and Contender pistols? Now, I know that there are some rifle-style stocks for the platform. Does that mean that some people can, unwittingly run afoul of the NFA regulations?
Yeah, honestly, we tell people that it's to imagine it a lot like you would rules for building an AR-15 just from the receiver. You can, it depends on how you want to start out with it. We always recommend that if you want to start out with it as a pistol and decide later to go rifle, that's easier and there's less technicalities as far as the ATF is concerned. They don't care if you put a 26-inch barrel on a pistol because as far as they're concerned, it's less killy, less dangerous, not as easy to hide in a trench coat and walk into a bank. I don't know. But if you were to take a frame that is registered as a rifle frame, and by registered I mean that generically, as in the background check was done on that frame as a rifle to classify it as a rifle, you can't turn around and say, well, I'm going to start using this as a pistol and then switch back and forth to rifle, because then what you've done is you've created a short barrel rifle or an AOW, which are NFA regulated items, and if you were to be caught by someone who actually cared, you could be in a heap of trouble. Now, the truth is, these are the most vanilla, least intimidating guns that you will ever shoot. And so as far as somebody freaking out because you decided to hunt with your rifle frame as a pistol and then convert it to a rifle and then all of a sudden took it back to a pistol and you didn't pay your $200 tax stamp, most aren't. I mean, they're not going to bat an eye. We never advise it that way, but if you choose to behave that way and you choose to snub your nose at the government and the NFA, we can't stop you. Like we don't have someone show us paperwork that they registered their frame as a pistol before we'll send them a pistol barrel. You know what I mean? It's completely based on the honor system, just like it is if you home build an AR-15 and choose one day you built an AR pistol and you say, you know what, I'm tired of this buffer tube, I want to put a stock on this, and you put a stock on it without first submitting your Form 4 for your Class 3 short barrel rifle, you've now committed a very serious crime and could be punished with up to 10 years and $250,000 in prison. That's just what we tell people all the time to scare them is, well, here's the penalty if you get caught. Right. You decide what you're going to do, but if somebody takes exception to it, it's $250,000 and up to 10 years in prison. So if you're willing to roll the dice, go for it. We just say it's not worth it, regardless of how ridiculous the government is and their laws. Now, here's an interesting thing. A lot of times now, Thompson Center can classify a specific frame. Remember, I said you can compare these to like an AR-15 receiver, how it leaves. Most of those just leave as a receiver, but if they build them in-house, they'll send it out, and the serial number will be classified as such a thing. So Thompson Center keeps a record of all the frames that go out, what they're classified as, rifle or pistol, and then that's how you should have your FFL run the 4473 form. However, it is my understanding that if you were just to buy a frame from us, now we sell individual frames. That's another reason we've grown so fast is most Thompson Center guns, you go to Cabela's or Bass Pro, and you look at a single shot gun with, like I said, it's so vanilla with not many frills, and their price tag on it is $900, and you choke on your drink and go, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I'm not going to pay that. Well, you can get them from us for about 25% less, or if you want to build it from the ground up and you just want to buy a frame, or you have extra barrels at home and you want to buy a frame from us, G2 Contender or Thompson Center Encore, you can just buy the frame from us. And they run a little over $300 just for the bare frame itself. And I tell people, when you receive that frame, have your FFL have market pistol, rifle, or receiver. How if you're going to build it from the ground up and you're going to do that yourself, then if you want to electronically submit a short barrel rifle form and do that at home, you can do that. If you want it just to be classified as a pistol, have them run the background check on it as a pistol. That is where the frame receives its designation, and that's where the legal side of it starts, is when the person does their background check on that new frame.
Right.
Or frame for transfer, even if it's been in existence as something else. I believe what the ATF cares about most commonly is the most recent classification of a specific firearm. So even if maybe I owned a rifle frame and I sell it to somebody on Gunbroker and I ship it to their FFL and they go in to pick it up, run the background check as a pistol because they want to use it as a pistol, the ATF doesn't care about me because it's been transferred out of my hands and somebody else has that gun with a different serial number now. It's not mine anymore. So that's the short story, quote unquote, of the legality of that. If shorter barrels are available, yeah, you could keep a rifle stock on your frame and put a 15-inch pistol barrel on it, and now you've got an SBR, which, by the way, if you're into suppressors, if you're out there, you're listening, you're into suppressors and short barrel rifles or anything like that, these turn out super cool because they're a really short package as it is, and then you can take a little 10, 12-inch barrel of something like a 22 or a 300 Blackout or something nuts and gnarly like that, and put your suppressor on it, and they are stingy quiet. I mean, so quiet. They're movie scene quiet. Like anytime you see a suppressor in a movie, you know how it sounds like somebody's sneezing or blowing their nose or something like that. They're just that quiet. That's how quiet these single shots are when you put a suppressor on them. It's just ridiculous.
And that's the thing, you run afoul of the law at your own risk, and you
Exactly.
understand how things are going. And I know, like, I fired, a buddy of mine has a single shot, I think H&R in 38 Special.
Oh, nice.
Using really heavy 38s with a suppressor on it, it's incredible how quiet it is.
We have a couple barrels we've been waiting for, custom barrels chambered in 357 Remington Maximum.
Ooh.
Yes, I knew you would like that one from our friend Mike Bellum, who's a gunsmith extraordinaire. He was an understudy to P.O. Ackley and bought his shop and all of his tools and everything when P.O. died, and or prior to his death actually. And he's making these barrels. The system is way cool, but he's making mine a 16-inch 357 Remington Max with a 5/8 by 24 millimeter thread pattern, so I can use a multi-caliber 9 millimeter suppressor on that gun. So I can run like 200 grain, 220 grain, 357 Rem Max loads and suppress it, and I can run subsonics through it and still get pretty good thumps. So we're debating on maybe using that round for a caribou hunt next September that we're doing. So
That is going to be beautiful.
yeah, very cool.
Now, what are some improvements you'd like to see to the Thompson Center firearms?
It's a little bit sad to talk about this so soon, but I'd like to see them improve on the final product and then in turn the customer service side of things. We we see kind of an unfortunate amount of what I would consider to be factory rejects that somehow manage to make it through quality control. It's possible that it seems amplified to me and my father because we spend so much time with these guns, and you see so many through the door, and then, you know, trades come in, and then ones that we send out, and I do the gunsmithing for the trigger work on them, so you're getting into the internals a lot, and you're looking at things, you know, it's like visiting someone who didn't expect you to come over, but you go into their house, they invite you in anyway, but the house is a disaster. Like, that's kind of what it feels like, where they send it out, it looks like a great product on the outside, the finish is strong, you tear it apart and you start looking at the internals, and the MIM and the forged products are just atrocious. And so I'd like to see a little bit better quality control. Now, it's taken some time. They moved from Rochester, New Hampshire, which is where Thompson Center was originally founded and all these were manufactured, and moved to Smith & Wesson's site in Springfield, Massachusetts. And I always tell people, if you find a used TC frame, whether it's Contender or Encore, you find a used TC frame that under the trigger guard, close to where the stock nut is to mount it to the buttstock, that says this stamp New Hampshire, keep that frame forever, or if you sell it, make sure people know what it is and command a pretty penny for it, because the people that were building those knew what they were doing. They did it for years and years and years. Kind of like when Remington bought Bushmaster, and they stayed in Maine for a little while, but then they were like, no, we're going to come to Ilion, New York. And none of those people in Ilion were well versed in Bushmaster guns, and so in 2008 or 2009, whenever that was, they started sending out Bushmaster stamped guns that were garbage. You're going, what happened here? That's kind of been the same sort of feel where it's taken them a really long time, because it's not. Smith & Wesson is most concerned with things that say Smith & Wesson. They bought Thompson Center because they felt like it would be profitable to them, not their flagship brand. You know what I mean?
Right. And the Wyndham weaponry, not Wyndham weaponry, that's what they are now, Bushmaster. I'm up in Maine, and so that's kind of something that hits home, you know, here. And I always heard that Bushmaster was great and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden I started hearing Bushmaster is crap, and it's like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, and it's sad. Now, you said Wyndham weaponry, you know,
yeah.
Is a little Freudian slip there. They came back and they said, we can't see guns going out like this. We have to fix this. And so Dick Dyke took all that money that he made from his massive sale to Remington and reopened everything and put money into bringing people back. And they make fantastic, solid guns at Wyndham Weaponry. You know, they picked up right where they left off.
Yeah, so I think he bought the old factory and all the tooling.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the interesting thing was that town was that factory. So it was even little subsidiary companies that they bought from suffered and went out of business whenever Remington moved it to New York. So, major bummer. But you know, these things happen. And so with anything, you have trying to blend the old and the new. You have Thompson Center frames that started being made in Springfield, Massachusetts by only a few people that were originally from Rochester. Those people, if you know that if you're from New England and you don't know the difference between New Hampshire and Massachusetts, you know you don't want to leave New Hampshire. You know, and they were like, well, we were going to give them healthy stipends and you know, these move severances and all this to bring them with. And I think two people went. One of them, his name is Ernie French. He is a old TC master gunsmith, and I think the other person was in like customer service or something, and then she didn't last and she ended up leaving. So that's the second part of what I wish they would change or do better is none of the customer service people there, that it's taken them so long to learn TC stuff because they're all Smith & Wesson people. They don't know part numbers, and then as a result of that, when there are problems, for instance, if you buy something Thompson Center and you receive it, let's say you buy it from us. You buy it from us, you receive it, it's not great. You're a doer, you know, you handle your own business on your own. So you contact Thompson Center and say, hey, I've got this problem with this barrel. The locking lug on the bottom of the barrel lug is really, I can't get it into my frame. I don't know what the deal is. And they'll say, okay, send it to us. And then you send it to them, and they will have it for probably 6 weeks before it's resolved and comes around and is back in your hands. And that's even if they get it resolved. A lot of times I would say just send them a new barrel and then we'll figure out what's wrong with this one and then fix the problems we've been having. No, they'll a lot of times get something, look it over, then fix it or say they fixed it, and then the person gets it back and it was never right. So what we do is the way we've gone about correcting that, and I think one reason our business has grown so much, and Dad would tell you, or I would tell you that our company's customer service is number one, is we don't even ask our customers to deal with the factory warranty services. We say send it to us, we'll send you a replacement, and then we'll deal with them. Because in that time, we've been able to make contacts in customer service and quality control where we know people by name and can get that in and be sure that it's fixed right and then receive it back and sell a new product rather than have that customer who they don't want to do that. They just bought a new piece or a new gun or whatever that component is. They want to start using it immediately. They're still out all that money and then they don't get the satisfaction of using their product. So in the end, it's the final products that they're putting out and their customer service. Those still have some leaps and bounds to go as far as getting better.
Now, besides the stuff that you guys sell in terms of the Thompson Center line, what other products, services do you guys offer, and what's in the future for that sort of thing?
So we picked up, as a result of the Encore stuff, we came across and learned about Bergara barrels. Bergara is a subsidiary of BPI Outdoors. The most familiar name you would have with BPI is CVA. So CVA guns in Duluth, Georgia, all come out of that factory. And then even like the new silencer company, Dead Air, they're manufactured by BPI. And then probably 99% of their manufacture are OEM barrels for big name companies that you wouldn't even realize didn't make their own barrel. Okay, so they make these Encore drop-in barrels for which they have to pay royalties to Thompson Center for basically using their frame blueprint to create a barrel that fits into theirs. And we found on several occasions that their barrels shoot much more accurately than Thompson Center barrels do. It's not always the case. Usually it's the slower calibers. For whatever reason, the Bergara barrels do really well with slower caliber rounds, whether that's a pistol round in a rifle setup or pistol barrel, or maybe you're shooting like a 444 Marlin or a 4570 or something like that. Those lower velocity rounds do really well in the Bergara barrels. So we started that relationship with Bergara. And as of last year, after SHOT Show, began carrying their CVA Apex line. So it's going to be their version of a TC Encore. It's a full-size rifle frame, interchangeable barrel system, and they've actually had a few before that, but this is the one that they have really landed on that's kind of turned out to be a big winner. So we sell the CVA Apex frames by themselves with stock sets, or you can buy the barrels or complete guns or whatever. So we started carrying CVA stuff plus some single shot models they make. They're called their Hunter packages or their Scout packages, both in pistol and rifle configurations. They're a lot more affordable. They just don't have an interchangeable barrel system. So if you're into that single shot platform and you're like, well, I don't know that I want to spend the money for a TC, looking at those CVAs are really good options. It's about 75% the price for the Apex guns as it would be a comparable Encore. Now, one of my favorite things that we started doing is about a year ago we started offering trigger jobs. Initially, that was a basic trigger job, which meant we were swapping out the factory internal parts with aftermarket springs. And so you got a new hammer spring and a new sear spring and installed, and then check pull weight. And we had them, they were about 3.5 pounds is what they were going out the door. Now these TC rifle frames are hysterical because it's like no two are the same. They're all like snowflakes. Some of them can have a 4-pound pull on the factory trigger. Some of them are like 6 pounds. I've even had them as high as 8 pounds on a factory trigger. Nobody wants a rifle trigger at 8 pounds. I don't care. Even if you're shooting mil-spec AR triggers, you'd prefer not to have a trigger like that, right? And so I learned how to do that, and we order our trigger kits from Mike Bellum TCs, and that's also Mike Bellum TCS at TCS.com, and Bellum is spelled Bellm. Anyway, they are located in south of Grand Junction, Colorado, in-state with us here, and great parts. Heavier hammer spring means there's less travel time, which means you're removing the variable for movement from yourself between when the hammer strikes the firing pin and when you pull the trigger. So the less that can happen in that amount of time, the better. In July, he came out and visited, stayed with the family for a couple days, taught us some stuff, gunsmith type stuff, and we have certification from, I can't remember the name of the gunsmithing school, or it's a community college, and it was a gunsmithing program at a community college in South Carolina that he teaches at, and walked me through and taught me the inner workings of what we call an enhanced trigger job. Now, an enhanced trigger job takes all contact points and polishes them down to a mirror finish. So I'm taking the frame entirely apart, taking the internals apart, using a diamond lap, soapstone, and making things just smooth as glass. And I'll tell you what, I am extremely proud of how these trigger jobs are coming out, because I've had them as low intentionally as 1 pound 15 ounces. That's the lowest I've sent out. But they're all falling right in the 2 pound 8 ounce to 2 pound 12 ounce category. And it's fantastic. It's startling. There's no slop, zero creep, breaks clean as glass, and is a nice short, crisp pull. And one of the best things you can do for your accuracy is improving the trigger, because like I said, the time between when you decide to pull the trigger or you surprise yourself by pulling the trigger and when the bullet leaves the barrel is actually a surprising decent amount of time. And so the more that you shorten that up, the more accurate you're going to be. So that's one thing that we offer from the site also at houseofarms.com are our trigger jobs too. And then there's some other small components to the hinge pin. Put a heavier diameter hinge pin into your frame and barrel. It's going to tighten things up, reduce any side-to-side play. A lot of times we'll get these frames from TC, and the hinge pin there's no tension or friction at all. It'll just fall out. Pick up the frame, the hinge pin, and to explain that, just here visually through the miracle of sound, you have your frame, the barrel sits in it, there's a lug that just kind of rocks in and then has a hole through the front of it, and then the frame has a corresponding hole, and you slide this 1-inch hinge pin through, and it's amazing how much 1,000th of an inch difference in thickness can make in the tension there and the accuracy. So that's another thing that we offer there too.
Yeah, you talking about that lock time, it kind of reminds me of people shooting like single-action revolvers. They're not used to, the time between you pulling that trigger, the hammer falling, and then finally striking the primer. So I'm sure that makes a huge difference.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it really does. And you're right. That's a hammer gun principle in general. You could say that for any hammer-fired gun. You could say that for 1911s. You could say that for train jump the track. Any revolver, large frame revolvers, especially where the parts are bigger, lever action guns that are hammer fired. And so we're just following basic principles of marksmanship and then gunsmithing. The less friction there is on the inside with the parts that move, the smoother and crisper and better experience you're going to have as a result of it.
Well, I didn't think you had it in you.
I'm your Huckleberry. Why, Johnny Ringo, you look like somebody just walked over your grave.
Fight's not with you, Holiday.
I beg to differ, sir. We started a game we never got to finish. Play for blood, remember?
I was just fooling about.
I wasn't. Say when. Show Johnny Ringo who's boss with Patriot Patch Company's Huckleberry Patch, a must-have for any range bag. Pre-order yours today at patriotpatch.co.
So, Ebbs, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, and I've learned a lot myself. I wasn't aware of all the different facets of the company and the different products, so really appreciate it.
Hey, man, Ryan, I really appreciate you having me on. And as you can tell, I can talk for a long time about guns, any type of guns. This just happens to be the topic of the night, so I consider myself fortunate to be able to do something like this.
So where can people find more information about you and the companies and stay updated?
Well, House of Guns, the blog/gun community, as it were, is pretty much smattered all over the web as that name, HAUSOFGUNS, and that includes Facebook, that includes Instagram, it includes Twitter, the .com, houseofguns.com. The YouTube channel would be youtube.com/C/houseofguns. And I post daily to most of those platforms, except for the website and YouTube. Those take more preparation. But in terms of gun ideas and thoughts and cool pictures and links and stuff like that, goes up on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook very frequently. And then House of Arms, our site is HAUSOFARMS.com, and that's our main store site. And then we also have a gunbroker store under that name and an eBay store. We can't sell our serial number guns on eBay. They have a conniption fit even about barrels a lot of times. But they've come a long way in allowing us to sell barrels. And we sell a lot through them too. And that's, I think, something else that separates House of Arms as far as availability and customer services. If you're a buyer or a patron of Gunbroker or eBay and you trust their buyer system and feel safer with that, we can accommodate. So, yeah, easy to find us at any places under those names, House of Guns and House of Arms with an HAUS.
Excellent. So there'll be links to that in the show notes. So, like I said, really appreciate it. Hope to have you on again soon.
Hey, man, anytime, let me know. We can change the topic, and I'll talk just as long about anything else.
Gun Guy Radio says thank you and proudly displays artwork and graphics designed by Ryan Cross of Hunter of Design. hunterofdesign.com.
So that about wraps up this episode of Gun Guy Radio. Remember to subscribe to us on iTunes so that you never miss a show. And please leave us a review there as well, gunguyradio.com/iTunes. Please consider joining the NRA and the Second Amendment Foundation. There are links there in the show notes. And don't forget to check out the other shows on the Firearms Radio Network. Also, be sure to check out the Patriot Patch Company, started by FRN's own Jake Challand and Ryan Cross. Patriot Patch Company offers high-quality 3D PVC vinyl patches with Velcro backing that is sure to satisfy any tastes. Their new I'm Your Huckleberry patch is available for pre-order and is a personal favorite. Patriot Patch Company is also running a pre-order right now on the Firearms Radio Network t-shirts, which are really high quality. I can't wait to get mine. And the Patriotic Flag Patch 4-pack. Be sure to check them out at www.patriotpatch.co. This is Ryan Bachad, and I'll see you next week.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv. Freedom. How does one maintain freedom? That's a question our founding fathers pondered over 200 years ago. They believed the solution was in our Constitution and its amendments. We exercise the freedom of speech every day here at FRN, along with the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Preserving freedom. We believe the Second Amendment could possibly be that one amendment that protects all the rest. Help us to preserve America as a shining light on the hill. We do our part by providing entertainment and information that supports the Second Amendment every day. Preserving freedom. What do you believe? Get involved. Show your support at patreon.com/FRN.